Anyone who thinks it's easy is wrong. It is an attack on a way of life.
He wore many hats over the course of his decades-long political career. But the role Donald Henry Rumsfeld is best remembered for, Defense Secretary, the only man to hold that title twice. The most recent, Secretary of Defense under President George W. Bush, where he saw our country through some of its hardest days and was unwavering in the decisions he made to keep Americans safe. Rumsfeld was born in Illinois. He attended Princeton University and was a naval aviator before running for Congress in his home state, winning a seat in 1962 at just 30 years old. He served 4 terms in Congress amid the Vietnam War and went on to serve as an aide to President Nixon before being appointed ambassador to NATO. In 1974, he led President Ford's transition team and later became President Ford's chief of staff. Ford moved Rumsfeld out of the White House and into the Pentagon as the youngest Secretary of Defense in U.S. history.
It was a simpler world. We had one major problem. The Soviet Union was expanding.
After President Ford lost the 1976 election, Rumsfeld spent some years in the private sector as one of the nation's top CEOs. President Reagan asked Rumsfeld to be his Mideast envoy, a position that even brought Rumsfeld face-to-face with Saddam Hussein, the man who would become his biggest foe almost 2 decades later. A Rumsfeld biographer says he sounded early alarm bells on terrorism and threats to the U.S. homeland.
He was trying to alert the American public to the idea that this is a new threat and a new kind of threat. He went so far as to say we would have to hit the terrorists where they are in order not to be hit by them where we are.
That fear was manifested on September 11th, 2001. Rumsfeld was then serving as Defense Secretary a second time under President George Bush. He rushed to help after the Pentagon was hit.
I felt the shock of the airplane hitting the building, went through the building.
In the weeks that followed, Rumsfeld led the response to the attack and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq.
There are people who are trying to do things against this country and other free people, and they're having a dickens of a time. There is no pause, there is no lull, there is no quagmire.
Secretary Rumsfeld faced heavy criticism from the start.
Greetings, how are you, Brad?
In 2006, I sat down with Secretary Rumsfeld and asked him about experiencing that backlash. When you hear people say, we won the war, but we lost the peace.
Oh, that's nonsense. We lost the peace. There were people saying we lost the war after we were in it for 3 days.
Rumsfeld's a liar! His tenure was also controversial for the use of enhanced interrogation techniques, the Abu Ghraib prisoner abuse scandal, and conflicting information about weapons of mass destruction, despite the Bush administration insisting that Iraq had an active WMD program. Stockpiles were never found. But Rumsfeld maintained the battle the U.S. faced was unprecedented, uncharted territory.
There was no roadmap available to the president or to me on September 11th. It is the policy to go after terrorists where they are and to go after countries that harbor terrorists. The problem with terrorism is there isn't any way to defend against it.
And he acknowledged that the fight would not be a short one. How do you judge success in this war?
It's very hard to do. First of all, this is a war that's going to be a long war. And it's going to take years, I'm afraid, like the Cold War did. We do know that we're putting a lot of pressure on terrorists, and life is more difficult for them. It's harder for them to raise money. It's harder for them to move around. It's harder for them to communicate with each other. It's more difficult to recruit people. But it's a difficult thing to measure.
Good afternoon and welcome to the White House.
Amid the criticism, Rumsfeld offered his resignation in late 2006.
It's been quite a time. It recalls to mind the statement by Winston Churchill, something to the effect that I have benefited greatly from criticism, and at no time have I suffered a lack thereof.
Rumsfeld and his wife Joyce were married for more than 50 years. She spoke to the role of faith in their life.
I get to sit next to him in church, and I can feel him in prayer. I love it that it is there for him and that he is acknowledging his faith.
But Don Rumsfeld himself was quiet about that faith.
Certainly, your faith and your values and your experiences all contribute to decisions you make and your approach to things and your judgments about the kinds of things you're engaged in. I suppose that's true of everybody in their own lives.
In 2019, Secretary Rumsfeld visited the Pentagon 9/11 Memorial with former President Bush and then Defense Secretary Mark Esper, laying a wreath and standing in silent prayer to pay tribute to those lost that infamous day. Near the end of his tenure in 2006, I asked the Secretary about his legacy.
How do you want history to remember you?
Oh, I don't even think about it.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Come on.
I don't. I don't.
The history books, when years
look,
from now.
I won't be around to read them.
Somebody will.
That's fine. Let them read them. No,
You have to think about legacy a little bit.
I really don't. I think about doing what I'm doing, and I live full days. I get up early. I stay up late. I feel happy to be doing, in fact, I feel fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. To be able to be involved in something as important as this at this moment in our country's history, I think is something that I feel fortunate to be involved in.
In Washington, Brett Baer, Fox News.